Welcome to the IE427 garage, everybody. I believe last video we left off with the panels, the engine panels on the coupe, and we're going to start exactly where we left off. So come right back and we'll talk about the decision that's been made. I made a trip to the hardware store this morning, and this is the specialty hardware store that we use for all of our machine screws, our bolts, all that kind of stuff that you can't find at the local home center. And I picked up some stainless steel button head screws for a number of things, but primarily for these top panels. So the decision was made last night. I put a post up on Facebook, but I also sent a text to the car owner to ask what he wanted to do about these panels, because we want to maintain these to be removable, and I'd like to see some continuity. So I don't want to use like pop rivets on this one and then button heads on this one and pop rivets on this one again. I'd like to make it just, you know, a nice continuous use of hardware on the top here, because it's all going to be seen right next to one another. And we got a number of different opinions on, it wasn't a poll or anything that I put up. I just said, you know, would you guys rather see, you know, pop rivets? Would you rather see black button head screws? Would you rather see stainless button head screws? And I think it was split. I think half the people wanted to see button head screws, half of them wanted to see stainless. The owner has chosen stainless. So, of course, one of the questions from Mike Everson was, well, did you make all the holes even? Well, yes, the holes are even from one side to the other. So they all line up all the way down the panel. And even on the panels that I didn't do previously, they're close enough that by the time we put our button head screws in there, it'll look like it was supposed to be that way. We're not mismatching holes from one side to the other. They're evenly spaced. It really looks, I think it's really going to look sharp when it's all done. So I stopped by the hardware store this morning, and of course I got the button head screws for the panels. And so I got 1032 by, I think there's a 5/8. And the reason I got 5/8 is because that's generally the length of pop rivet that I use when I'm putting pop rivets from the sheet metal to a chassis member. But it's not so long that if you have to put a number of these in, you know, your arm's going to get tired, you know, screwing in each and every individual button head screw. So there was kind of a method to my madness. But in certain spots, we're going to have threaded inserts. So these along here are all going to have to be threaded inserts, because I've just got like a backing piece underneath here to join these two panels, because this was once all one panel right here. From here to here, it was all one panel. And so while I want to maintain that same look, I also want to be able to get a good grip on those panels. And so therefore, I'm going to have to put threaded inserts in, because the 040 aluminum isn't good enough to hold a thread on its own. Even using the fine thread screws that we're using, I'm not going to get more than one thread in there, and obviously I don't want it to strip out. So we're going to put threaded inserts. I'm probably going to order steel threaded inserts for this, in a 1032 flavor so that one, it matches up with our hardware, and two, it has less of a tendency to gall than if I was to use, let's say, aluminum threaded inserts. Then I think they'd be doomed. Even if I were to use some type of anti-seize on the threads, pretty sure every one of them would want to, you know, lock itself in there and then spin and not want to come out. So I'm going to go with steel threaded inserts for that. But along with that, I also got hardware for, and I got my coin change in here as well. I got a collection of stainless steel machine screws in a 1/4-20, along with some acorn nuts, some standard nuts, some nylock nuts. And what those are for is those are going to be for our wireway covers across here and our battery tray down there. So I'm going to go ahead and start working on that. Probably the battery tray next. I'm going to wait on the panels because one, I need to order the threaded inserts, and two, I'm not ready to put those panels on even close right now because I'll wait to affix those permanently once we get a lot more stuff in the engine bay. And two, I still want to run some electrical. So I want to get our electrical harness run out here underneath where this panel is. I want to get that electrical run under here, the harness anyway. And I want to get our battery stud welded in, and I want to get our ground stud for our, basically our dash components welded in over here. So I'm going to work on that, and I'll pick up the camera as soon as I've got something else to show you, whether it be the battery tray all bolted in or the ground stud. So come on back. I believe in the last video I was sending off tires for the trailer, tires and wheels. I actually took them down to the tire store to have new tires put on our wheels, and they have made their way back here. So Scotty down at Tucker Tire arranged for their driver to drop these off at the shop, and I think they dropped them off while I was gone because I got back and they were here. So what I'm going to show you is what to do to these weights so that they stay there between the time you get your new tires and the next time you change out your tires. What you're going to do is you're going to take some of this stuff. This is just foil tape that they used in the HVAC industry. Cut it a little piece of it, or a piece appropriately sized, so that you can completely cover up your tape weights and get a nice seal all the way around so that these tape weights are going to remain in place for the life of the tires that you're putting on there. So generally, you know, tires, you want to replace them every 5 to, I'd say, 7 years, depending on application and whether or not the vehicle's, you know, stored inside, whether it sits outside, stuff like that. I'm not going to get into a whole tire discussion, but one thing I did before the tires and wheels went to the tire shop is I cleaned this whole outer perimeter of the inside of the wheel so that there was no chance that the tape weights were not going to stick. And you can see some of the places where I kind of took the wire wheel on the drill and I cleaned off all the old adhesive in other spots that tape weights had been. So here, here, and here. And I got it all clean. Now, your tire store should clean off the area where they apply the tape weights, but that may not happen. So my suggestion is always to clean the wheel yourself before you go down and have your new tires installed. That way, when they put the tape weights on, you bring them home, you go ahead, you put the foil tape over it, and it's going to stay in place a good long time, and you're not going to have to worry about throwing one of these weights while you're driving down the road and throw the tire out of balance. And so all I do is I just cut a piece that's going to be big enough to cover that area, peel off the back, and stick it on there. It's amazing what a couple of days can do to the weather. Last week, this time, I think we were at a daily high of about 50 degrees with overnight lows in the 30s and rain. And today, a week later, it's 85 degrees outside and I've got the air conditioning on in here. So you never know. I just came into the shop and noticed there was a package that was delivered, and sure enough, this is our power steering return hose that we've been waiting for. So I'll put this in the description of the video, provided I remember, but this is a SUNSONG 3401-463. This is for a Ford vehicle from 1979 all the way until 1990. Now, what I noticed, and I may have said this in the previous video, is if I had the part number, I could find it all over the internet. I mean, I found it on eBay, I found it on Amazon, I found it on Parts Geek. Regardless of where throughout the internet, I could find it on these websites. But trying to search by year, make, and model for that hose proved almost impossible. If I found it for instance on Rock Auto by searching the part number, and then looked it up by year, make, and model without logging out, it would show up. But if I logged out and tried to look for it again, I don't know what kind of witchcraft they're playing on some of these sites, but that's the part number. And there is also another corresponding number from EDELMANN and one other company. I'll do my best to put the EDELMANN part number up as well. Now, I understand if you get the KRC power steering kit from Factory 5, it's going to come with those little adapters. The problem is the way it seals, it doesn't seal the same way as the factory lines. They both have an O-ring at the top. But what the factory lines allow you to do is the actual tube itself will spin inside of the port. And so once it's tight, the line will move but not knock the threads loose on the fitting. So it won't leak. If you use the adapters that come with the kit, what's going to happen is you're going to tighten those fittings up and you're going to inadvertently knock one of those lines, and then it's going to leak. And I found that once they start leaking, they're impossible to seal back up. That's why I go with these. It may cost a few extra dollars more, but the peace of mind of knowing that you're not going to spring a leak on your power steering lines, to me, is well worth it. So there's the line. I'll bring you back. I've kind of changed what I'm going to do today because that line showed up. But let me show you some of the stuff that I got started on yesterday, some of which I got finished. I got the battery tray all mounted. So that's in place. You can see it down there. I'll come around the side over here, and maybe you can get a little bit better view of it. So the battery tray is installed. I've got it in place. I ran the bolts up from the bottom and put the nuts on the top. And I probably wouldn't have done that had I not gone through the build manual and seen that that's the way they show it. And it kind of made sense because the frame on this thing is so low. If you have those bolts sticking down, there's more of a chance of the bolt end getting caught on something. And so I thought, well, you know what? Since I'm using button head machine screws for this, I'll send them from the bottom up, put the locking hardware on the top, and then we'll have less of a chance of it ever scraping anything. So that's what I did there. And then what I did is I came into the cockpit of the car and I started doing a little bit of dieting on the harness. Now, this is our front harness. And I still think we're going to take that out through the front of the foot box here. But our fan isn't going to run on this blue wire. It's just too small. It's only a 14 gauge wire, if that. And then we also have this 16 gauge wire that is for the thermostatic control if you were like using this in the hot rod, the 33 hot rod or the 35 pickup, where you would actually mount the sensor in the radiator. So I generally don't use that on a Roadster or a coupe because there's another one of these green wires that go in the engine harness that feeds the gauges and whatnot. And if you're using a small block Ford or a small block Chevy or one of those, you can use the one that's in that harness, same green wire. They're just tied together at the other point where they come together at the relay. You can use this to control it instead. Now, in the last car, in the King's Cobra, we actually just combined these two wires and used them for the fan. And I could have done that here. But I think what I'm going to do on this one is I'm actually going to run a dedicated number 10 gauge wire out to the front, and I'm probably going to end up welding on a third ground stud, and I haven't decided on which side. It may be over on this side. I may put it, you know, somewhere down in here, on one of these tubes here, or maybe even down there. And that's going to give me a dedicated ground for just the fan. Now I'll tie that in with the Ron Francis ground as well, so we'll have a redundancy in our grounds. But I've done that on a couple of the like Coyote cars, and it just seems to work well with the Ford control pack. The Ford control pack actually has its own fan wire, and it's a 10 gauge wire, and it's good for, you know, 50 or 60 amps because that's what the Ford fan pulls. And we're using a Ford fan here. The problem is the Holley system doesn't have a fan relay. It just has a trigger wire. And so it's up to us to make sure that we have a relay and a fuse and all that stuff that's going to handle that load. So all that stuff's going to go in behind the dash, and we'll work on that when we get to that point of the build. But I want to run that number 10 wire in that front harness and get it all reloomed and get it in place, probably, I'm hoping today. But that's where I'm at with that. But like I said, I had a little sidetrack. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on those power steering lines. I'll bring you back and I'll show you what they're going to look like before I take them to the hose shop to actually have the AN adapters welded on the end or brazed on the end. So this is what the hose looks like as it's delivered. This is what we're interested in. This portion, this hardline portion of it. And you can see it has a similar O-ring that's going to seal it in that port. The difference is this spins, and it's not going to unscrew like those small little like screw-in adapters that you get in your kit. We're going to pull this hose off, and I'm probably going to cut this. I'm probably going to cut this right about here. So I will get the hose pulled off. I'll get these over the bandsaw. I'll cut them. I'll get them prepped, and then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll screw them into the ports in the power steering rack. Or maybe I'll show you them out of the rack first, and then I'll screw them into the rack so you can see exactly how I'm going to orient them. But yeah, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take this apart, and we're going to cannibalize this metal tube and make it into an adapter. So here are the two hose ends that we're going to make into adapters. So this is for the high pressure line, and this is for the low pressure return. You can see I cut this low pressure return right about where I said I was going to. There was a little bit of a kind of a bend after this point, and so I didn't want to get into all that. So there's that one, and then of course the high pressure line's right here. Now there are two different materials as far as the tubing. So the tubing on this one is a little bit thinner and a little bit lighter material, and it could be lighter because it's a thinner material. This one just seems more substantial, and you can see they're a little bit different color. One of them has a coating on it. The other one just seems to be like the natural color of the tubing. It's not going to matter because when I take these over I'll probably take these over to the Ontario store. Dusty's going to braze the AN6 fittings on here, and then we'll probably hit them with some rust-proof paint just so that they don't corrode over a period of time. Let me get these put in place. You guys can see what they look like on the rack, and it's a little bit different in the coupe because we have limited space. We've got a panel that makes up the back of the radiator tunnel right there, which really starts getting in the way, and so the angle at which these tubes come off becomes really important. This is what I've got. I've got the high pressure line coming down right here, and I've got the low pressure here, and you can see these will move. They're snug, so the fittings aren't moving, and even if I tighten them down more, it'll still allow this end of the tube to move around a little bit. So you're less apt to have leaks because these are designed that way. I toyed with the idea of making the low pressure line come out through here, but it just put it a little bit too high. That may change when I get the hoses and the fittings all ready and start routing everything, but I'm going to leave it this way for now. And I also could have taken this and brought it out to the side of here, but it ran into kind of the boot on the bellows for the tie rod ends, and I wasn't real happy with that. So I think this is where everything's going to kind of stay. The two ends are somewhat even, so the hoses are going to be about the same length. And I'm going to use the straight ends of our KRC hoses here. I'll use the 90s over on this side, so I'll have a 90 coming off of here towards the front of the car. And then on the bottom, there is a port right here. This is the pressure side. I don't know if you guys can get in the, yeah, right there. So it's right here. That is the pressure side, and we'll send that 90 out this way, and it'll meet up with the other hoses. And I think I still have some of those two like position clips that'll go over two hoses that we used on the Texas car, because I think when Nick, the car owner, ordered those, we ended up with, I think they were in a pack of 6. And I think I may have used 2 or 3 on his car. And I have a couple of those left. So we'll see. I might use them on this car because they're black as well, and it'll blend in with everything else that we've got going on the front of the car. So I got all of the power steering kind of stuff figured out now. I'm not done, but as soon as I get those fittings brazed on, that will all be ready to go. So now that that's done, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump back into the wiring. So I'm going to basically cut these 2 wires back at about this point here, and they will become one number 10 on both sides. Now I want to make this clear to everybody. I have gotten burned on this before. The Ron Francis harness, especially for this connector, has 1, 2, 3 green wires. They're all the same size. And they're not really marked on this side of the connector. See? There's no labels on them. But they're clearly marked on this side. So I know that this wire is the thermal wire for the fan. Okay? So I can take that wire, and it's this bottom left connector. So that'll be the bottom right on its corresponding connector. And it says fan thermal. I suggest that you guys trace out all these wires. So the blue wire, the thick blue wire, there's only one, but you can see it goes straight through, and that's the cooling fan. The top is the top green is the horn, and I can trace that all the way down the other side, and I can make sure that that goes to the horn. I can't tell you how important it is to check these connectors before you start putting power to your harness. If you're sending 12 volts to something that doesn't require 12 volts, let's say you're sending 12 volts to a sensor or a sending unit in your speed hut gauges from your Ron Francis harness, you can damage the gauge. So make sure that when you're plugging these connectors in, one, the colors match on each side of the connector, and make sure if there are multiple of the same color wires, that you trace them out to make sure that point A going to point B is the same function in the harness, because if you don't and you power it up, you may burn something up. So I'm going to jump back in that. Don't know if I'll bring you back today or not, but wiring is usually pretty boring. I don't know who wants to watch me do wiring, but as soon as I get that far enough along, I will bring you back and show you what's going on with it. All right, we're already in evening hours. And I've got this harness pretty much ready to get the split loom put back on. So I dieted out the green and the blue wire. You can see I snipped them right about here. And I've got a brand new piece of number 10 gauge wire. And that is going to be the feed for our 2-speed fan. I'm going to get this rewrapped. And then I don't know if I'm going to get to it tonight. I really want to still get that panel cut out. But then I have to get a hole drilled. I'm going to get this off, out of the way. I want to get a hole drilled, somewhere through here, and get that harness out through here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully route it like underneath here. Let's see. Back in here. So basically inside here, as far down as I can before I make the transition kind of around the coilover mount and everything. I'm thinking I might be able to hide it somewhere in here and then come down and underneath this rail and, you know, out to where it needs to go. We'll see. But that's my plan. So I'm going to get that rewrapped now. I'm going to get the split loom put back on it, and then I'll probably put it aside till tomorrow and see if I can spend, what time is it? I don't know what time it is. We're getting close. It's already like 5:45. Get that rewrapped and then maybe start on that panel, because I'd like to get that panel kind of in place so that when I have time, I can start the cutout for the drop box. But I'll catch up with you guys tomorrow. It's the next day, everybody. It's amazing. I cleaned up the shop last night, and it's already a disaster again. Boston, More Than a Feeling. That's the song that was just playing as I turn the camera back on. I want to show you what I'm working on in the front, and then I'll come back to it because I've got the lift up, and so I figured I'd show everybody. I got the front harness kind of in place. I've got the grommet coming through the front of the foot box there. Then what I did, I actually talked to Paul, who is Edward B, on the forum, see where he ran his harness, because the coupe assembly manual is so vague about how the harness is run. It's ridiculous. So I've got a strap here, I've got a strap here, I've got a strap here. These are going to be hidden under our panel right here. And I've got it loosely in place. Here's the horn. It's going to drop down. I think I'm going to mount the horn right over here behind the steering rack. And then it goes down and out the front. I'll show you that in a second. And then over and across the bottom of the cross tube right there, out to the other side. But let me get the lift down because it's going to be easier to see, and I'll show you the trunk panel that I finally got finished. And we can take a look at that. So I finally figured out after all these years how to get the lift down with one hand. We'll stop right there. So here's the front of that chassis harness in the front. So I've got it coming out through here. I'll basically get some cushion clamps and probably put it to the underside of this panel, this tube here, and the same thing over here. And the wires are going to be awfully close, meaning, you know, as far as reaching the front nose. The coupe is longer, and so therefore you need more wire. So that's that. And then from the top, you can see, you're not going to see this. So I purposely put the harness in this position here so that once those panels go on the top, you won't even see the harness. And then I've got a strap right here to keep it in place, to keep it out of the workings of all of the pedals as well. And then I've got it in here, right about here. So before I picked up the camera, I was getting set. I've got the ground here, and it's going to reach where I want over here. So it's going to reach over here where I'm going to put my stud. So I was checking that out. I figured I better pick up the camera because it's already, I think it's about 5:30. And I know Mrs. IE427 is going to want to go to dinner here in a little while because it's Saturday night, and that's the night we go to Mexican food. Put that panel over here. So the thing I started on today was this panel. So you can see I've got it notched here. I got it notched at the front. Basically, I just took the old piece, used it as a pattern. I have the holes marked in it. So I'm going to start drilling those maybe tomorrow, maybe during the week. This isn't a priority, but as I said, I think in the last video, since I had a sheet delivered, 2 sheets delivered, I figured I might as well, while the table was out, cut this thing down to size, and it fits perfect. I've got the cutout for the fuel pump over there, and then remember, we're going to have a drop box over in here, so I don't need to worry about putting the other access in there because that'll go in our actual drop box. So that's kind of where I'm at today. Not real sure where we're running on time for the video, but I'll take a look at that tonight while I'm doing some editing, and I'll figure out whether or not we're going to continue or not. But that's where I'm at today. I will check in with you tomorrow. Our music update is Nickelback. If everyone cared. I'm going to end the video here. I've already started on next week's video. I'm going to show you how to center your steering rack, because I think a lot of people miss it, and then what happens is they run out of steering adjustment, meaning they've got one tie rod end screwed in farther than the other, and the alignment guy doesn't know when you take it there that the rack isn't centered, because most of the cars that they do, the racks are centered before they start. And that doesn't have to do with the actual rack and how it's bolted in the car. It has to do with how you put your hardware on, your tie rod ends, and making sure that each of the inner tie rods are an equal amount out, and that the steering wheel is in the center of its rotation. So I'll go over all that next week, but you can see I've already started on it. But I'm going to leave it here. If you're enjoying the content, please, as always, do the like, the share, the subscribe, all that kind of stuff. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.